One of the biggest issues that we see, especially with people that quit the job after a shooting or after a traumatic thing that happens to them, is that they didn't think it was going to happen to them. They had this personal fable that was oh, that'll happen to somebody else. Statistically, I'll never have to shoot somebody. And all of a sudden, bam, they're pulling the trigger and they're like, have a total meltdown and can't do the job anymore. So what happens is that because their expectation didn't match what happened, like their whole reality breaks down, and that's real hard to put back together. It's that in a world, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Put the frame in place, make your expectations proper, and then do the work on the front end so that on the back end you're okay.
Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to another episode of 911 Delta Tethered for Life podcast. As usual, this episode may not be suitable for all listeners due to language and content, so listen with care and stay safe out there.
Welcome back to another fabulous episode of 911 Delta Tethered for Life podcast. This is your gal, Kacey, and my partner in crime, Anna. Today's guest, Anthony Shefferly, is joining us from Indiana. His impressive career spans 17 years in law enforcement, including 14 years on SWAT. He's worked in areas like gang and violent crimes and narcotics. He is also going to talk about heroic industries. So grab those headsets. Let's talk.
All right. So, Anthony, thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have you on. Can you give us a little background on you and then what your mission at Heroic Industries is?
Yeah. So a little background. So I'm originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, currently in Northeast Indiana. Grew up in Michigan, played sports a bunch, ended up playing college football at the University of St. Francis, small college football here in Indiana, and then went to school there, got my undergrad in psych, my master's in psych, and then ended up getting hired on at a local department, which I will not name for purposes of social media, and then been here for 17 years and done on the job anyway, I feel like at least one of everything that you can possibly do in police work so far. So like worked in narcotics, undercover, did, gang and violent crime, uniform patrol, did a ton of time in operations, just street uniform, and have been on our SWAT team for 14 years now. So,
wow.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. And then with Heroic Industries, so during all that, I was also owning and operating a CrossFit gym. It was called CrossFit Tactical Strength. Love doing that. It was a ton of work though, running a business and being a full-time cop. Like that's a lot. It's not like being a firefighter.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Like if you're a firefighter, it's basically built in that you can do whatever you want on like at least 2 or 3 days a week, so that's easy. So I was running that. I ran that for about 8 years. And then 2021, I sold it on the back end of COVID. So I sold that and then started doing online work and kind of went back to like the grassroots of what I wanted to do with my CrossFit gym, which was train cops, right? Train cops and first responders. So now I get to do that with Heroic Industries online.
Cool. Thank God for AI editing because until I get my crap together. All right. So to give us a little idea of what got you started with Heroic Industries, can you share what drew you into law enforcement and what it was like working in a variety of areas like patrol, SWAT, and gang units?
Yeah. So originally I got into law enforcement. It was my, like the event, the life event, if you will, that kind of spurred me into like, hey, maybe I want to do this. Was sophomore year of college was September 11th. And my mom's side's all from out east. So my uncle actually died in the towers. So that was a big impactful moment for me when I was like, you go from just a college kid playing football, like that's all that was on my mind. Like, who's got beer in their dorm room, and then what's going on like after the games, playing football, right, that kind of stuff. And then it's like, oh shit, there's a whole world of like things going on where it's like kind of, stuff like that happens. It kind of lifts the veil and you're like, oh man, like I need to start paying attention. Like this stuff is impacting me. And then how can I impact, like the rest of the world or even my small area? Like how can I take control of this feeling that I have, like because in essence, like, it depends how like existential you want to get with this, but events like that are very impactful and like, traumatizing, if you will, to like, either individuals or like collective groups of people. And you can handle that like several ways. But so to me, I was like, you get victimized, and it's like, well, how do you take control of that? And how do you kind of own that and not become a lifetime victim? Well, you figure out how, like, how I can never feel out of control with this again. How can I, take more ownership in this process? And the answer for me was like, I'm either going to drop out right now, join the military, or I'm going to finish up here and then look into stuff like law enforcement or maybe military on the back end. So that's what I ended up doing. And this was the route that I chose.
That's awesome. Now, with so many high stress roles under your belt, what motivated you to transition to the heroic industries, and how does it differ from like traditional academy training and that type thing?
All right. So if you want high stress, like being a first responder is a good way to do that. If you like, like having your heart rate jump to 180 beats a minute for no reason at all, definitely do that. But another great way to do that, if you really like to stress yourself out in a less physical way, but a more emotionally stressful way, is start a small business where you need people in the doors to make money, and that is ultra stressful. All right, so owning a business is an emotional roller coaster. Like police work's a roller coaster in a different way, but owning a business is like, it's like 1 second you're on top of the world. I made a bunch of sales. I got people in the door. They're coming in my gym. I love it. It's so fun. And then literally 2 hours later, something happens. Somebody quits the gym, tells you suck, and you're like, I like everything sucks. I'm getting rid of this place. Like it is an absolute disaster emotionally for you. So yeah. So how can you add stress on top of stress? Well, be a cop and start a business where you, but after I offloaded that, sold that, and it worked out really well for me. I'm still full-time law enforcement. I don't plan on going anywhere. And this gives me the opportunity to actually have more time to train people, and make an individual impact. Right. Because I get to do it, there's no geographic like fence for the internet. There's no geographic fence. So I can talk to anybody, I can help anybody, and I can do it in a way that's a lot more like one-on-one, not just in a group fitness class, so
Right.
it allows me to use my background in psychology, my experience on the road, the fact that, I've been in multiple shootings. I've seen, like tons of stuff on the job. And when I talk to people, and it's like I had a client the other day who was like, hey, she just got into a shooting, I think in the summer. And then she's back on the road, and then texted me last night and was like, hey, like there was another dude that got into a shooting, and I'm starting to have like a little bit of an issue with it. And it was weird because she didn't have an issue with hers, but she had an issue with someone else's that was close to her. So it's like you get the opportunity to like make an impact at that level where you're kind of walking them through stuff, and based on experience and education and all that on a like a different scale, so that's really what is really enjoyable about that, and connecting the dots between like mental health, physical health, performance, and all that as it relates to first responders and tactical athletes. Does that answer the question? I was kind of like all over.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like how we started this podcast. It was what I thought originally a joke from Anna, but she was being for real. And it's basically that's what we do. We use this as a way for people to vent, or, be able to talk about just about anything with no holds barred. And we have a lot of fun, and we can use it to educate as well. So that's sounds like pretty much kind of like what we do.
Yeah, I guess with dispatching part-time then, and having my own business on the side too. I don't know why we do that as like first responders. There's so many, especially
I can
firemen,
tell
right?
you,
Like it's
you
like,
need to make money.
well, that is right. It's like, God, you got to make, and then you just stress yourself out even more by doing these other things. And then I was like, but this would be so cool to just like have a podcast and talk about this shit that nobody talks about. And so that's how we got here. Do you do like do you train people and do like the police competitions.
Like police fire games, stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the sport that the athlete wants. Like, I totally can.
Gotcha.
When I did CrossFit, I competed at like the regional level, which is like back in the day. Now that I'm old,
Right.
like nobody remembers it, but like back in the day when CrossFit first started, uh, it uh, it was like the CrossFit Games. Everybody can do that. Like if you want to,
Right.
you can sign up, pay $20 or whatever, and you're in, right? And then that's like the buy-in for every layer up from there. So regionals is like the mid-level, like I call it like high school, college, and pro level, right? The games that you see on
Right.
those pro level. So I was at like the regional level, like the medium, pretty good dudes. So like I've got enough background with that, jujitsu and football, where if somebody came and was like, "Hey, I want to compete in whatever sport," like I've done enough training, I can take you through it, and we can come up with a comprehensive plan for whatever said sport is, right? Um,
Gotcha.
for the most part, the stuff that I deal with is mostly just general health. Like, how can I get healthier, gain muscle, be stronger, more functional for the job, whatever that means for that person. Most people, it's like, recompositioning body fat, making sure that we have good amount of lean tissue to support the function for the job, to support brain health, physical health, and longevity. And that's one thing that we do a crappy job with is longevity. Not just on the job, like 20, 30 years in the career, whatever it is, like fire, police, whatever, military, same thing. But afterwards, because our stats are terrible for retirement. Like there's a
Oh
reason
yeah.
that free healthcare was on the table, like insurance is like included, because they know that we die so fast, it really won't matter anyway. I'm serious. Like that's the thing. Like, oh yeah, we'll throw this in on the back end. It'll be really good for you. And then within 5 years, statistically, cops are dead after retirement. So like at most, you're going to have to pay 10 years and these dudes are going to be dead. So it's a wash for the government. So to know that like longevity has to be part of this equation. Otherwise, you're going to retire and you're going to die in 5 years. And I don't think that's really the goal, or at least it should be on your radar,
Yeah, I
I know being
agree.
in dispatch, that's all I did was fucking eat. I don't do it so much now that I'm not dispatching, but those 12-hour shifts, that's all Mountain Dew, Dr. Pepper, I mean, anything.
12-hour shifts should be illegal. They should be absolutely. I really believe that they should be illegal in the world of first responding, whether it's dispatch, whether it's working as a first responder. It should not be allowed. They got laws for truckers that you can only drive X amount of hours in a 24-hour period or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But like you're going to tell me that you can put a cop in a car and tell him work 12 hours at night, like 6 to 6, let's say, for 2 weeks straight, and then you're going to give them 2 or 3 days off and then flip it on its head and say go back to work and do it again, and then at the same time
Yeah.
working part-times, going to court, screwing up their sleep, so they're up for periods of 24 to 36 hours straight, right, with no
Yeah.
monitoring, with no oversight. And then we're going to demand perfection driving, perfection shooting, perfection use of force. Like that's ridiculous. That's
Yes, it is.
stupid. So
It is.
there should be laws against it. It should be 10 hours max, and then and then you get a break. You have a mandatory break. It has to be that way for X amount of hours, and like dispatch should be included in that without a doubt. And the fact that it's not is beyond me.
Yeah, totally agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, I agree too. It's rough, and I feel like it's clear that you're trying to genuinely equip people for the realities of their jobs, which is something that Kacey and I have talked about before that is just not out there. It's like, here, come do this fun job. You're going to sit at a desk and answer the phones. And, yeah, there's going to be some adrenaline and whatever, but they don't really prepare you for what you're going to hear, what you might see, um, and then what it's like to sit in a dispatcher's world, most of us, not everybody works 12s, but sit on your ass for 12 hours and then try to maintain that longevity. And I know, firefighters are no better. They drop dead of heart attacks after they retire or die from some terrible type of cancer in rapid succession. I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about longevity, and the guy was saying that the three most important things to keep healthy are your heart, your lungs, and your thigh. And I was like, interesting. But the thigh mentality is those are right your big propeller muscles. And back many years ago, before we all had smartphones and Zoom and all of that, you had to walk to go see your friends and do whatever. So people who were social and got out and walked and met people lived longer than those people who didn't. So now when you have these policemen and firemen, they retire, and what do? Sit their ass on the couch, drink usually,
Well,
and then right, yeah, and then then they're dropping dead, right? Um, and I think the same is true for dispatchers too, if you last that long. So, can you share an example or a concept practice that you teach that breaks away from the traditional, eat properly, drink lots of water, don't get the high sugar snacks?
okay, so you want the secret? You want the absolute secret sauce with this?
Sure.
Yeah, you kind of just said it. Like it's the boring shit. It is not like, oh, what can we do other than the basic? Like, oh, everyone's tired of hearing this. Like, all right, so eat protein, drink water. Like that is not, those are like one and two, right? As far as nutritional, make sure you're not over your caloric needs for you from a metabolic rate and from an energy expenditure. Like if you spend a lot of time sitting, bad news, like you don't need that much food. Like you didn't expend any energy, so you don't get a whole ton more than what it takes to just keep you alive. Now the exception with high stress jobs is you have to understand nutritional needs based on like hormonal responses, stress responses, stuff like that, because that changes things a little bit too, as far as like, how your body is operating. But especially as far as dispatch goes, like movement, like what that, heart, lungs, and thighs. Like I would say, like you can simplify that and make it aerobic work. Your heart needs to operate. You need to be able to like have your heart circulating, have that be healthy. That's critically important. But the thighs part, like that's just speaking to movement. Like you need to move and you need to have muscle, right? Lean muscle is such a critical part of everything. And we get so caught up in like, oh, I need to lose the fat. I need to lose the fat. Well, maybe, but what's the easiest way to do that? Is the easiest way to lose fat, focus on endless cardio and like starving yourself? Like probably not. You're probably, even if you do it, what I see is like people don't have an issue losing weight, they have an issue keeping it off. So like you might lose 100 pounds and all of a sudden, like, the same person, I have a ton of people come to me, they're like, hey, I lost 50 pounds 2 years ago and now I gained to 75. I just don't know how to keep it off. And if you change the frame, if you change the focus, then the little boring things where you're like, oh, eating protein, drinking water, like, yeah, but you're framing it in a way of deprivation. So it's not that the thing, it needs to change. The thing's going to be the thing. Like the basics are always the basics, but how you view that is really critical to success or failure. So if you just simply change it from like, I need to lose 20 pounds to I need to gain 10 pounds of muscle, right? That has to happen. Then it changes from a starvation deprivation to, all right, I need to gain. That means I need to eat. That means I need to eat more protein. That means I need to lift weights, right? That's going to change things a ton. And skeletal muscle is an endocrine system. So it does affect your hormones. It does affect your longevity. It affects your brain health. Like type 3 diabetes people are talking about is dementia, right? Dementia comes from a lack of movement, lack of skeletal muscle, lack of muscle contraction, is part of that too. So like that's a big thing that especially with dispatch and in cops are bad. Firefighters aren't quite as bad with like muscle, like gaining muscle, because they're a little bit more meatheads than us. As much as I like, and I'm actually kind of jealous of that. But they have to lift stuff and wreck things and that kind of stuff. So it takes more muscle to do that. So they're more apt to think it's more important, right? Cops, we just kind of sit around a lot. You don't use a whole lot of physical capacity unless you're like running, kind of, but unless you get in a big knockdown drag out fight where you physically are not strong enough to deal with it, it might never be on your radar. Like, oh, I got to get bigger and stronger, so muscle is a big one. And I think that's like, if that's the one thing I could kind of answer your question with a little bit more succinctly is like, like, hey, total calories, total protein, gain muscle, right? And get your heart healthy. Like if you did those things, like you'd be all right, and then we can dial it in from there.
Awesome. That sounds good, but also awful at the same time. Coming from a fat ass who like drinks a shit ton of Pepsi Cola and that kind of thing.
Does it sound worse than like sitting on a treadmill for hours on end every day, like bored out of your freaking mind? So like from that standpoint where it's like, all right, we got to do 4 days a week of cardio at 20 to 30 minutes a shot where you're sweating your ass off and being bored and like and then not seeing really immediate results either. Like that's hard too. Or can we go in the gym and get under a squat bar and learn to move? Your joints are going to feel better, like almost immediately. And you're going to notice a difference from a muscle standpoint almost immediately. Like within 2-3 days, you're going to feel the soreness and it's going to feel shitty. But at the same time, like, you did something. It's not like guesswork. It's like, I know that I broke down some tissue and I know when this gets healed, I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be better, and you don't have to do like, you can do that in like half the time, so you can train for 20 minutes total, 30 minutes total, especially if you're coming from like ground zero. Like if you're coming from nothing, you definitely don't need to go, 60 to 90 minutes in the gym. Like your workout and my workout are not going to look the same. Like they're going to look the same based on movement, but not in total volume,
I will say the 1 or 2 times I've ever stepped my ass into a gym, it does make you feel good. It's just, for me, getting to the gym, and you don't even have to necessarily be a member of a gym. You can do the stuff that you're talking about, I'm sure, in the comfort of your own home. But I think it's, in my opinion, better to leave the home, because if I'm home, I'm not doing shit. I'm going to lay my fat ass right down and watch my shows or be on my phone. Like I wouldn't do anything productive.
The best plan is whatever works with that, That's what I always tell people too. When we're coming up with plans, you also need to pick something that you like, right? So like lifting weights, resistance training is like a non-negotiable, but there's a million and one different ways that you can do it. You know what I mean? Like if you like barbells, cool. If you learn to fall in love with them, cool. If you do CrossFit, like I saw that a lot where, especially women would come in and they'd be like, I really don't want to touch a barbell. And then be like, well, just try it out. And all of a sudden in a month, they're like throwing weight up over their head, like crying because they just PR'd a clean and jerk, right? But if that's not your thing, it's okay. We got to figure out how to work resistance training into shit that you like, right? Because like that has to be part of the conversation with like nutrition too, is like, what do you like? What do you not like? How do we work this into a plan that you'll do? Because if you hate it so much that you're not going to do it, then I can give you the best plan. But if you still hate it, it's going to be like not effective at all. So which means it's actually a shitty plan. So like the best plan is one that works.
Yeah. And I think, for women, like it back in the day, because I studied sports medicine in college. And so my degree is in physical education. And, back in the day, there was such this big thing of, like, you don't want to get big. You gotta, do your little weights and 8 million repetitions and whatever. And in the sports world, we knew that wasn't true.
Right.
And so when I got out of doing straight athletic training and was working in some clinics and trying to tell people that, like, hey, you're not going to get, you're not going to look like the Hulk or, the Rock or whatever. It was really hard. It was a hard sell. And I think women are getting more into it now. And especially like with the CrossFit thing, once they realize, oh shit, like I can do this and I can be strong and then there's also that it builds the confidence, it makes them feel better. So I think that's great. I hate it when you're like see low in there doing, I mean, don't get me wrong. I could do like some hip hop dance class, but I could do it. I might be terrible at it, but I could do it. Now aerobics, you don't want to put any steps in front of me or anything because I might fall down. Because I'm like a straight lift girl, and then riding horses is my actually athletic activity. But yeah, I just think women, especially if you're in law enforcement or firefighting, it's like, get on the weights, girl. Like, help yourself out.
Yeah. Well, the conversation was always comical with like apprehensive women when I had my CrossFit gym, because I would say, listen, like, one, are you a biological woman? Yes or no? And they'd be like, yes. I'd be like, okay, so you don't have the hormone profile of me. You're not going to look like me. And then the second
Right.
question I would ask is, are you taking anabolic steroids? And they'd look at me like, are you retarded? Like, what is wrong with
Right.
you? No, no, no. Are you taking steroids? And they'd say, no, I'm not taking steroids. I'd say, okay, good. So you don't have any hormonal profile that looks masculine or like you're a man. You will not look like a man, I promise. And I'm going to throw in a guarantee that if you don't like the muscle you put on in 90 days, I'll give you all your money back and you can quit. And they were like, okay. Like I said, you let me know.
Nice.
I never
Yeah.
had it, never had any
I,
refunds on that. Not a one.
I bet not.
So,
Awesome.
given your background, especially in high risk units like SWAT and narcotics, how do you think your experience shapes the approach Heroic Industries takes in teaching the mental health?
So with mental health, especially in high risk stuff, I've done a lot of thinking on that, and I really hate when people say, and this is going to sound like not empathetic, and that's not the case, but it is like sympathy.
That's okay.
Well, sympathy and empathy are different, right? So like I'm
Right.
really bad at sympathizing because I don't think it does a whole lot. Like for me just to like cry with you about bullshit like is not super effective. Now I can empathize with you like as dispatchers I've never done your job, but I can imagine like how it feels to sit in a chair and hear things that you have no control over. And it's like, oh man, my job is to relay this information. You're like a filter, right? So I imagine that takes a major toll, and I wouldn't want to do it, right? I've never done the job, but I think I can empathize with that. So empathy is really important. And the fact that I've done this job and I understand it, like that helps a ton. But you have to really understand, like when you're going into these professions, it's not an if, it's a when, and it's how many times am I going to see dead people? How many times am I going to shoot somebody? How many times am I going to have to fight somebody in an alley? How many times am I going to have to stand here and get yelled at or spit on and I can't do anything about it because it's not appropriate, right? Like, or it's illegal if I haul off and whack this stuff. Like, how much shit am I going to have to absorb? It's not an if it happens, or I hope it doesn't happen, or I want to come out and get to a quiet part of the city as quickly as possible. Like that's not a good way to frame it. Like your expectations have to be appropriate. So that's a big thing that I focus on with mental health is like, hey, put it in context, right? It's going to happen. Now we can accept that and we can own that space of like, it's not an if, it's a when, right? And then how do we preemptively plan for the things that we're going to go through, and we do a ton of prevention on the front end so that on the back end, we can handle it a whole lot better. Because one of the biggest issues that we see, especially with people that quit the job after a shooting or after a traumatic thing that happens to them, is that they didn't think it was going to happen to them. They had this personal fable that was like, oh, that'll happen to somebody else. Statistically, I'll never have to shoot somebody. And all of a sudden, bam, they're pulling the trigger and they're like, have a total meltdown and can't do the job anymore. So what happens is that because their expectation didn't match what happened, like their whole reality breaks down, and that's real hard to put back together. So it creates this dissonance that just is like, this ain't gonna work, man. Like you're gonna have to like just call it a day and find something else to do and get therapy. Like, so if you can do an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure is kind of the answer, I think. And I equate it to like football, right? So like if you play football, you look at the back of the helmet, right? This drives me nuts about concussion protocols and why people freak out. On the back of the helmet, there's a little warning that says, this is a dangerous sport. It can paralyze you, kill you, and is super, super dangerous. It says it in a long paragraph, but it basically says that. So it's like you're ramming your head into somebody at 100 miles an hour, like for 2 hours a day, every day for 4 months out of the year. Do you think that head trauma is not going to happen? Like it's going to, but you're doing it because this is a really fun game and you get a whole lot out of it, right? So police work's no different. Like this is dangerous. It's going to mess you up physically. It's going to mess you up mentally. Like these things are going to happen, right? So now get ready for it. So it's no different. It's like, put the frame in place, make your expectations proper, and then do the work on the front end so that, on the back end, like you're okay,
Now, being in law enforcement, would you say like before you even started your career? Like for me, before I started dispatch, I was, you know, a nice, sweet little girl or whatever, liked everybody. But after so many years of dispatching, I'm not going to say that I hate people, but it is pretty damn close. And like the trust I have is I have no trust for anybody. It's terrible. So like I feel like that has changed me a lot. But I know not everybody is bad, and I don't know.
So as a
Do you
question,
think
like,
it's changed? Like, do you think it's changed, like, who you are as opposed from when you first started? Like, do you feel like you're different?
yeah,
Not so much in a bad way, but I mean, just like you really think of people.
yes, and but that's not always bad, right? So
Right,
like the big things that changed me, like, all right, so going back to when I started, right? So like 9/11 showed me like there's some bad people here that'll kill you just because of who you are, right? And then
right,
when I get into law enforcement, like all your training is like, hey, there's some bad people here that are going to kill you just because who you are. And it's like it just reinforces that concept and that notion. And then when you get out on the road, then you see that those people are real. And then you realize how many people lie to you, which is all of them, right?
right,
That's probably the big thing is like if I meet you for the first time, I'm immediately not going to trust you because I'm going to view you as a threat. Like that's just the way that if you're in this job, that's the way your mind is going to organize everybody. Where is this person a threat to me? Not are they a threat? Where are they a threat? Right. And then it's your job to kind of like keep reorganizing that and say, like, all right, is this person a real threat or am I imagining this? Am I seeing the worst? Is it appropriate? Yes or no? Sometimes the answer is yes, and you need to create distance from those people, right? That's what this job gives you, a really good barometer for that if you regulate it. Okay. So like you can keep a lot of on the flip side of that, if you don't know how to regulate that and tune that down, like you can push a lot of people away, especially like spouses and kids and stuff like that. And you can not even know you're doing it because you're
right,
organizing their behavior as a threat to you, either subconsciously or consciously. So that's kind of something that you have to evaluate, and you have to get good at evaluating yourself. Am I doing that? How much am I doing that? That kind of thing. Um, and yeah. But so that can be a serious negative. It can be a little bit of a positive. But what I really like about the job is that it shows you all the nasty shit, right? Like the worst of the worst stuff that you could possibly see goes on in every town in this country,
hmm,
right? Drugs, murders, gang violence, like you name it, right? It goes on in every city. So cops get to see all of that, and it can wreck you, but at the same time, it gives you a really cool view into the worst of the worst, into the darkness of humanity. And then
yeah,
if you take that and you put it in perspective, like this isn't everything. Just because I'm exposed to it on like an inordinate basis, it still doesn't take away from the fact like I'm going to go coach my kids in football and I get to see the goodness in the world, right? I'm going to go on vacation with my family. I'm going to see my kids having fun, and I'm really going to be able to like be grateful for that. And then that helps to like put the whole thing into perspective, right?
right,
Like, yeah, you see the worst of the worst and it sucks. And sometimes you got to like be a filter for society so that you can take care of that, because most people can't or don't want to. Um,
right,
but where we fail is we fail to look at what we have and be grateful for it. And gratitude does a lot of things. So if you're grateful, you can't be resentful, right? Those are opposites. And if you are one, the other one shuts off, right? So you can't be angry like if you like say you get home from shift and it was real bad, right? Something bad happened, it pissed you off or it bothered you. Say for me, it's always something with kids. Like when kids get hurt, it bugs me like a lot. Um,
hmm,
if I just internalize that and I come home and I'm not grateful for my own kids, then it's going to eat you. But if you see that and then you can kind of like navigate that and start to shift back to the other way and really be grateful for your own kids and the mess that they made on the floor and the fact that the dog shit on the carpet, nobody cleaned it up. And it's like, you can be really mad at them for it and be ungrateful for them. Or you can be like, well, they're here. They're not hurt. They're healthy, and like, yeah, I'm still pissed that there's shit on the floor, but like, I'm not going to forget about it because I'm just happy they're around,
right,
you know?
yeah,
And if you can manage that, then you can kind of then you can kind of bounce back and forth a little bit easier. And you can transition from like the darkness to the light. And another thing that really helps me understand a little bit more is that like Jordan Peterson talks about, like there's a darkness in all of us. Like we're all capable of really bad stuff, right? And if you fail to acknowledge that, like I have the potential to do like really bad violence on somebody, like I could, if you fail to acknowledge that, then there's a way higher chance that you're actually going to do something fucked up, right? So like understanding that piece lives in everybody kind of makes you not appreciate the bad stuff, but like understand it more. And if you can understand it more, then it doesn't bother you as much. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, it does.
Okay.
That's a really good way of putting that.
Yeah. Cause I mean, that's one thing where it's like senseless violence and senseless like tragedy is hard to make sense of, right? Because it's senseless. But if you can try to understand it better, then it's like, oh, then you can start to piece it together and make some type of sense of it, which then helps you compartmentalize things a little bit better, rather than just like the world is just violence and we're all going to hell and this is just
right.
Yeah.
Awesome advice. All right, so now share with us and everyone listening how to find you on social media, on the internet, and then if there's anything that you would like to say to anybody new coming into public safety, give us one piece of advice for them.
That could be a show by itself.
Right? Because we have lots of pieces of advice.
Yeah, right. So you can find me on social media, Anthony_Heroic Industries, and just Heroic Industries on Instagram. Those are both good. Heroic Nation podcast is actually I've gotten not a ton of like downloads yet, but like there's been some really good shows. I had a guest on the other day named Rafe Kelly, and
I just watched a clip of that. Yeah. It was fantastic. While I was getting my nails done, I'm like, I need to do some more research.
Dude,
he was fantastic. Yeah.
So Rafe is incredible. He actually was on Jordan Peterson's podcast like 2 years ago. And I was like, this guy is so awesome. And he made a comment about training law enforcement in there. And I was like, I got to reach out to this dude. So I reached out to him like 2 years ago. It took me 2 years of kind of like piecing together time to, stay in contact with this dude. And, but yeah, I thought it was awesome that he was on Jordan's podcast. And then I got to interview him. Like, this is pretty cool. So I was pretty pumped.
Pretty cool. I'll have to listen to the whole episode because it sounded really good.
So I've had the opportunity to talk to some cool people on that Heroic Nation podcast. You can download it on Spotify, basically, and YouTube, because I don't know how to put it on the other platforms and it's not letting me. So I should probably hire somebody to do that. But
just email me. I might be able to tell you how to do it because believe me, I struggled.
Okay. I will do that. And then as far as one piece of advice for newcomers to the space, I would say like keep training, man. Like that's as far as like general blanket advice, right? I remember one of my academy instructors said when we graduated, this will be the best you ever shoot, the best shape you're ever in, and something else the best. And I was always like really confused as to how that made any sense at all. Like my year 1 to year 3 version of me should not hold a candle to the year 17, 18, 19, that I am now, right? 17 years in, I look back and yeah, there's a reduction in horsepower. Like I can't run quite as fast, right? At 42, almost 43 as I could when I was 25. But I tell you what, like I can outshoot my old self. I can out wrestle my own self. Like my jiu-jitsu is way better. I'm stronger, right? I'm mentally way more resilient. So like, continue to train, continue to assess, and always be improving. And if you do that, like you'll be all right, Yeah.
Very good advice. Well, our time has gone by really fast. So we truly appreciate you taking the time to join us and share your journey and insights. We both wish you the best and hope that you stay safe out there. And as always, we thank you for your service.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap for today's episode of 911 Delta Tethered for Life. We hope you got something valuable from today's chat, and we'd love for you to keep the conversation going. So don't forget to rate the podcast. It helps more listeners find us, and it keeps us doing what we do. And hey, if you enjoyed today's episode, share with your friends, your team, or anyone who could use a little insight on public safety and mental health. You can also stay in the loop by following us on social media. We're always posting updates, extras, and more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.